more car shows, and over 200 miles an hour in a Chevy. Not a Corvette, but a 57 Chevy. Hello, I'm your host, Gary Neidert. Thanks for listening to My First Ride podcast. This podcast is about automotive nostalgia. You know, reliving the events, the sights, the smells, and emotions, the special memories connected to our first rides. Said another way, it's about allowing our memories to travel back in time and experience our special car moments all over again. Well, now that we're in early spring of 2022, local car shows are running full blast. April 30th and May 1st, it was car shows galore with 2 shows on Saturday and 1 show on Sunday afternoon. Now, the first show I attended was at Dickie's Barbecue in Rowlett, Texas. This was on Saturday. This was the first time to go to this show, and I was pleased with the cars and trucks on display. I got to talk with the owner of a 1955 Ford pickup, which was a great-looking vehicle. Now, he had one when his kids were little, but he sold it. You know, sometimes that happens. You have a great car, and family things take priority, and you have to sell that car or that truck that you enjoyed. Here's where the story gets really cool. Years later, his kids pitched in and bought him a truck similar to the one he sold years ago. I'm sure you can imagine this made the truck all the more special to him. Again, I really enjoyed visiting with him and having a great conversation with him. The next show on Saturday was a real treat. Not just because of the cars. I mean, there were some really nice cars there, but the people. The show was in Murphy, Texas at the PSA parking lot. And just like the one in Rowlett, the Murphy Car Show had a lot of great looking cars and trucks, but what made this show special to me was running into some friends I've not seen in quite a while. I enjoyed visiting with them and looking over their C8 Corvette. Of course, it was beautiful and it sounded fantastic. When I attend the car shows, I'm always looking for interesting cars that I can photograph. I especially look for interesting angles and close-ups and maybe some things not normally taken pictures of. And at this show in Murphy, it was like the other car shows. I was able to take several photos of some great-looking vehicles. Sunday afternoon, I wrapped up with another car show in Murphy, Texas. However, this one was at Country Burger. This show is one of many that Mustang Sally Productions puts on in the Dallas, North Texas area. Be sure to check out their website, MustangSallyProductions.com, for a full calendar of shows that they run through December of 2022. So I had a great time going to the car shows. Not long ago, I had to go to my local Kroger to do some shopping. And as I was looking for a parking spot, I noticed the back of a t-shirt with moon eyes on the back. If you're not familiar with moon eyes, it's a hot rod cultural icon created by Dean Moon, which was big into racing during the late 60s and early 70s. And I'll talk about more about him on a future episode. But that's what caught my attention, was those moon eyes on the back of the t-shirt. As I was walking through the store, I saw the guy with the moon eyes t-shirt. I told him that I really liked his shirt because of the moon eyes. We started talking and had a great conversation. However, it turns out he races at Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah with, you guessed it, a 57 Chevy with a recorded top speed of 217 miles per hour and an average of 209 miles per hour during the 2018 Bonneville Speed Week in Utah. His name is Tom Hurley. After we talked for a few minutes, I had to get going. But before moving on to get my groceries, he invited me to his shop to see his car. Well, a week or so goes by, and I called Tom to see about going by to look at his car. Once I got there, Tom showed me the car and talked about how it had been modified to run at Bonneville. Very cool. Very cool. Then he began to show me the photos on his walls, the walls of his shop. And it's a very nice size shop. And the walls were covered with all kinds of great photographs and flyers and memorabilia from many years ago. And you want to talk about a guy that's lived a full life? This is Tom Hurley. He helped bring what is now Autorama to Dallas in the early 60s. Tom started racing in top fuel rails when the driver sat behind the engine and sat right behind the rear axle. He then got the 57 that he races in Bonneville. Well, he raced it as a dragster also. He promoted a lot of VW events and off-road events during the 80s. Then a few years ago, he finally turned the 57 into the Bonneville Racer. Did I mention Tom's lived a full life? My time visiting with Tom was a real treat, getting to listen to the stories of him being involved in motorsports for all these years. And I found an article written about Tom called Why the Underdog Always Wins, a Speed Week story. Kristen Klein wrote the article in 2016, which was in drivingline.com. Now, go check out the article to find out more about Tom's Speed Week story and more details about how he started racing at Bonneville. And the link will be posted in the show notes. So go check that out. You'll be glad you did. It's a great story. Now, a side note to this story, Tom took me down the street to introduce me to Steve, which is the guy that does the paint and body work on the 57 Chevy. Well, it turns out Steve still has his first ride. And if I remember right, it was a 56 Chevy. So how cool is that? He still has his first ride. My thanks to Tom for giving me the tour of his shop, introducing me to Steve, and sharing some great motorsports history. What's coming up on my first ride? I'm constantly searching for people that would enjoy telling the stories of their first rides and how their lives were influenced by them. And I bet you probably know someone that would be a great guest for my First Ride podcast, right? Let me know a little bit about them and their story. What about telling your story on the podcast? Let me know a little bit about you and your first ride. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and more. And of course, you can also go to the website at myfirstridepodcast.com. One final thought. You may not have your first ride, but you still have the memories. It's time to share them. Contact me if you have any questions regarding today's podcast, or you'd like to be a guest on My First Ride podcast. Send an email to myfirstridepodcast@gmail.com. I'm Gary Neidert, and you just experienced My First Ride podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I forgot to mention, this is a picture of Tom's car. I know you can't see it on the podcast, but if you go to the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see this. But this is in 2018 when he averaged 209 miles an hour and with a top speed of 217 miles an hour. Pretty impressive for an old 57 Chevy. So take a look.